Hello and welcome to the NetScaler Podcast. My name is Brian Hune and I'm joined by my co-host Jason Poole. Together we explore the ins and outs of application delivery and security, deep dive into stories from the industry, and learn about the business challenges that face IT teams and how they overcome them. In this episode, we're going to look at automation in applications, why it's become so prevalent and why it's necessary, and how it works in the NetScaler and application delivery controller world. Jason, can you please introduce our guest for today?
Sure, Brian. Today we're joined by our dear friend Konstantinos Kaltsas from the NetScaler PM team. He's based in our Greece office and he's been with NetScaler for about 4 years and comes with a very solid application and DevOps background. So he's perfectly positioned to let us in on some of the secrets of automation. Kostas, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, guys. So it's always a pleasure to do a presentation to our audience, and we are covering today one of my favorite topics, as you already know. So glad to be here and glad to be part of the NetScaler family.
Thank you, Kostas. And I do know that you get excited about automation. Now, Kostas, I speak to many customers, and the one thing on all their lips is automation. How can we instantiate ADCs and configure them using code? You know, they understand the importance of application delivery and security, but they want their developers to be self-sufficient and make the ADC part of the whole application creation and update process. And now we'll come to that in due course, but I wonder if we might take a step back to help our audience understand the why this is necessary. Can you comment on some of the changes in software engineering that have occurred in recent times and how they're driving the need for automation?
Correct. So basically, we just need to take a step back, as you said, to see why there is a need for automation. And the need for automation is because the software engineering has changed also their practices of developing software. So there is also a demand for operations, a demand for everyone involved in this, let's say, process of releasing software to be able to adopt to these changes. So there are several changes that have happened in software engineering practices, and this led to also a need for evolution for operations.
And so what are some of these changes, Kostas? How is it adapted? What was there before? What's there now?
Just imagine of the following. So in the past, when software houses developing software, there was a linear process of doing that. So we were starting with gathering requirements. Then we were going through the process of designing the software. Then we were going to implementation. Then we were going to testing. And then we were releasing the actual software to the customers. But there is really a need to have some flexibility in that, to have some adaptability, and to also focus on the customer, because having a linear process led in many occasions to releasing a software where the software wouldn't really adapt to the market. Or let's say in this process, we identified some issues with the software, some requirements that we didn't account for, and several things like that. For that reason, there were several changes that have happened, and there are several practices that are being followed nowadays on what is the best way to manage a project, and also what are the best ways to also, let's say, follow software development lifecycle practices.
So, Kostas, I'm curious. So, it seems like this is definitely a transition from one way of thinking to another. Was this a straightforward transition, or is there a place for both of these models in software development still?
There is certainly not a straightforward process. And from my side, I have seen many organizations failing to move from the previous model to the new one. And let me also introduce some terms that several of the folks out there will also be familiar with these terms. So in the past, the most common way of developing software and managing software was to follow a practice that is called waterfall. So basically, this means the linear practice that I mentioned previously, starting from gathering requirements, designing the software, implementing the software, and all the steps that I described. But moving forward, most of the organizations are trying to follow a more agile approach. And agile is the new practice, basically, the term for the new practice that is being followed. So, although both of these two methodologies are focusing on how I should manage my project and how I should do also the software development, there are significant differences because waterfall is structured while agile is here to tackle all of these inefficiencies. How I can be flexible, how I can be adaptable, how I can focus on the customer. And this is where several, let's say, schools in a way emerged that also introduce different flavors of agile. But let me explain also what agile is. Agile is a practice that focusing on iterative, let's say, feature releases in a way. So you are not focusing now on, let's say, releasing the full software, rather than you are focusing on releases a portion of the software, some portion of the features of the software. And in this sense, you have a way also to emphasize collaboration, also get some customer feedback, and adapt basically to the market. And of course, again, as I mentioned, because there are several, let's say, different flavors of agile. You might have heard about Scrum, or you might have heard about Kanban. These are different flavors, different ways of applying agile. How an organization is going to do that, it really depends on their needs. It might be the case that you will have multiple teams. It might be the case that you will have small teams. You might need to have several meetings a day or no meetings at all. It really depends on the organization and how this can really work with an existing organization and the requirements of the organization.
So let me see if I understand that. So then, that first one, the waterfall, that's where you define everything up front. You complete one phase before moving on. So that makes it difficult to accommodate changes, I suppose. And it also assumes that all the requirements are able to be defined up front. And
correct.
It has minimal sort of external involvement. You do one thing, then the next. That doesn't have this continuous feedback that Agile seems to have. Is that fair to say?
That is correct. That is correct.
And also, it seems to me, if you've got lots of things going on, that Agile should be more scalable, because you don't have to finish one thing. Everyone can be working on what they're good at, so then it's scalable and faster in general.
That is correct, but we can't really say that there is, let's say, the correct approach out there, because I have seen multiple projects out there being developed and released using a waterfall approach, and other projects that are following agile practices. Again, imagine that as follows. When you really have a project that has well-defined requirements that don't really frequently change, then waterfall wouldn't be such of an issue. And you can see also in the way that I'm presenting it that I'm also a fan of agile. But in any case, on the other hand, when you need to also to adapt frequently to the market, and you need to also bring more feedback, change the requirements, do all of these things, then this is where agile shines. And let me give you an example of that. I have seen multiple projects when it comes to well-defined requirements, like, let's say, public sector. Usually in these cases, we have well-defined requirements. We know what a ministry, let's say, might need, or services of a country might need. And this usually will not change within 1 month or within a night. Something that doesn't really happen in e-commerce or in services that, the market is offering out there.
Okay, so that's making a lot of sense. Now, what I'm curious about is, what about DevOps? It's something we frequently hear about. Is this the same as Agile? And can you maybe explain that a bit more for us?
That's a great question. As a matter of fact, DevOps started emerging somewhere around the same time when Agile has also been introduced. These two practices, because both Agile and DevOps are practices, are aligning closely together, and their focus is in both cases to improve collaboration, efficiency, adaptability in software development. But there is a key difference here. Agile emphasizes iterative deployment and frequent feedback when it comes to delivering software. While on the other hand, DevOps focuses on how we can extend this philosophy to also integrate operation teams into the picture, because it is not only how we are going to develop software, we need also to release the software. So DevOps is also introducing continuous delivering, introducing continuous deployment, in these type of terms. I would say in a way that the main common ground of these two practices is that they try to reduce silos that are being created between the teams to promote also automation, because there needs to be a way to, let's say, create a culture of collaboration between software engineers and operation teams, and in a way also to increase something that we are calling continuous improvement, how you can be better in every iteration of shipping software, how I can have less bugs, how I can also, let's say, have less vulnerabilities, how I can be more precise in the requirements gathering, because all of this is not only related to how I'm writing code, it also has to do with how I'm gathering requirements, how I'm designing the software, how I am serving traffic, all of these things. So the common ground is how you can basically increase the collaboration and also have an end-to-end, let's say, cycle from creating software to releasing this to the customers.
So something I've been hearing a lot more lately is the term DevSecOps. And to your point of all these have been siloed, now that you've integrated security, now I assume you're starting to take in a lot of the security considerations by getting more collaboration across these teams.
Correct. As a matter of fact, DevSecOps is something that has been introduced after the adoption of DevOps, and as the term indicates, it basically tries to also introduce the security teams into the overall, let's say, life cycle. So when the DevOps practice has, let's say, initially started, the focus was only on how you can develop software and release the software to the customers. But now, DevSecOps introduces also a way to automate also the process of finding the actual vulnerabilities and the early stages of development without, let's say, releasing this in production. Also, this would be, let's say, also partial. This would be half of the picture, because again, DevOps is not focusing only on the early stages. It might be also have to do with how I can continuous response to security attacks, how I can do all of these things. So to wrap this up, I would say that DevSecOps makes sure that also the security engineers will be part of this cycle of software development.
See that I've got that. So Agile, different from Waterfall, but Agile and DevOps, DevSecOps, or DevOpsSec, however it ended up being, they share a philosophy of continuous improvement and iteration, basically, which is different from how it used to be. And that's what's leading to faster deployment also. And then the ops part brings in the delivery of those applications as well, not just the development, but the delivery of them. And also adopts that same philosophy of, we're trying this, if it doesn't work, we'll try something else, and we iteratively improve things. Is that fair to say?
That is completely correct.
Sounds perfect, but does it come with challenges?
It does. As a matter of fact, one of the main challenges that many organizations faced out there when they started adopting these practices, and mainly DevOps, has to do with the fact that although this collaboration between software engineers and operation teams assumes that would be some shared responsibility between the two, meaning that also the software engineers will be involved in this planning and this implementation. This was partially happened into the process. And in addition to that, and this is why we have seen also a new job description out there, the DevOps engineers. Because initially, DevOps was a practice. It was not a role. It was not someone that had to, let's say, fulfill this gap, bring engineering with operations together. But even if that is the case, imagine that even this role has its own challenges, because being an individual that should be familiar with both automation tools, both software engineering practices, also operation practices, is really hard to find out there. And it is really difficult to also maintain all of the different environments that, let's say, an organization will end up having, because we are talking about GA environments. There are way many environments that these teams need to handle. So for that reason, we shifted in a different term that nowadays is called platform engineering, to also solve this gap.
Interesting. So yeah, the challenges faced that DevOps was facing led to this emergence of platform engineering then. Can you explain a bit more on what platform engineering is and how it solved these challenges, or at least tries to?
Certainly. So, in essence, platform engineering builds on the common principle of DevOps. But the main difference is that for platform engineering, the focus is to provide scalable, automated infrastructure solutions, so that the engineers can come and individually request for these, let's say, environments using a self-service portal. And let me explain what I'm trying to say. Imagine that in the past, when we had the DevOps practices, that really meant that someone really had to write some automation scripts to do all of these things, to create an infrastructure. So someone would go to this team and request for a new environment to be created. While what platform engineering says is that I will not, let's say, create manually every time these environments, but what I'm going to do is I will gather all of the basic requirements. Based on these requirements, I will create a new platform. And through this platform, every engineer can go and request for the infrastructure required to be able to do his job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
It does, doesn't it? It really does. It's really putting the ops into DevOps, isn't it? So, but these
Correct.
developers don't understand about application delivery and rarely security, right? So we're just trying to help them through this with what we term platform engineering, but it's basically a self-service portal that helps them as code implement the things that they require. And we've been through this on many podcasts, Brian, about the importance of application delivery and security. You can build a great app, but if you can't deliver it, it's not a lot of use. Now, Kostas, let me shift gears here. So I've got an e-commerce customer, and they're the network team. This sounds like what you're describing. The network team are responsible for the app delivery and security, largely. So they've got hundreds of developers writing code, and they all come to this team, and they're the bottleneck. And the one thing they want to do is introduce a self-service portal so that the developers can take the responsibility of this aspect of their application themselves. So how might that work? And how it does still seem like extra work for the dev teams. How does it help them?
Imagine of the following. Let's say that I am an engineer for an organization and I'm developing a web application. So typically what happens is that I will need to deploy this application twice or 3 times because, my application needs to be reliable. But to be able to do that, I will need also a load balancer for that, to load balance the traffic to the 3 different same applications. So let's assume that we are talking about our solution, NetScaler. In this case, me as a dev, I would like to provision a new ADC in a development environment where I would only have access, and this would be an ADC that only I will have access, and I will also specify different things on this ADC. The different things required so that I can get access to my application, to load balance the traffic to the 3 different same applications. And also, I would like to do some additional things. I might want to, let's say, add some security on this application. It might be some rate limiting, it might be some WAF configurations, it might be bot protection. In the past, to be able to do something like this, I would have had to write down all of my requirements, go to the proper team and share with them my requirements, what needs to be done, and I would then wait for this ADC to be deployed, and then I would have tested my application. What we are saying now, by offering a self-service portal, is that I will skip all of this process. I will go to a portal that will have some predefined configurations from me based on the organization, let's say, policies or base requirements or anything. I will specify that I would like to deploy an ADC. This ADC will come with the default base security requirements, and from there I would only select the things that are applying for my application. It would be something like let's say a form. When I will give a name for my application, I will select from a drop down the different IPs where I have deployed my application. I will specify a couple of URLs through which I will again get access to my application, or I will have a checkbox to enable let's say rate limiting, things like that. So in this way, without going through a process of opening a ticket in a let's say for the IT team to do all of this work, or going through a conversation through the relevant teams that are being involved, I will just have an ADC deployed and I will have access to my application.
Just another click in deeper. For those who might not be familiar, what are some of these automation tools that are getting leveraged through the self-service portals?
That's a great question. So, in principle, when we are talking about either DevOps or platform engineering, there isn't really a suggesting solution to do this work. So, because all of these are practices, what is the best way to do things, to solve business issues, to solve, let's say, software developing or software releasing challenges. But there are a few tools, and there are a few, let's say, categories of tools that are being widely adopted. So usually what happens is that the teams that are going to build this self-service portal will either want to use APIs or would like to use infrastructure as code. In essence, they would like to build integrations with the different solutions out there using code. Because again, we need to always remember that whoever is going to build these portals is going also to follow software engineering best practices. So they need also to use code to do this. They need also to store this code in a repository, to do versioning, to do also testing, even for this platform creation, because at the end of the day, even a self-service portal is a product for an organization. Now, if I am to highlight a couple of tools that we can see more often, these tools would be tools like Terraform, like Ansible, and this type of tools. Basically, tools that are around how I can do automation or configuration management through code.
That's great. And Kostas, tell me, where does NetScaler fit into this?
That's a really good question. As a matter of fact, NetScaler automation is one of our strategic initiatives for many years now. Having said that, we have a really solid NetScaler Automation Toolkit that gives you several ways to be able to make NetScaler part of these practices. Having said that, even if we are talking about Terraform integrations or Ansible integrations or next generation APIs, we have you covered. So all of these things are there. You can use our tools to integrate our product with either DevOps pipelines or directly with the self-service portal. And there are more things coming up. So please stay tuned and you will see more updates and more solutions being released soon.
So let me just summarize this. Software development is changing from the old waterfall approach to the agile approach, and it's proving very popular. And DevOps and DevSecOps share that same iterative philosophy for more rapid development, and businesses are seeking this for a competitive advantage. And that's led us into this idea of the developers needing to or wanting to take control of the actual application delivery and security piece that's so vital to the success of their applications. And they're not experts at this, and that's led us into this platform engineering and this automation. And we try to get everything into that as code because that's what our developers speak. So that's really great, and it's nice to see that NetScaler has been leading this charge with their automation toolkits and the way that it fits in with the Ansibles and the Terraform producers and stuff that we've got. So I think that you're absolutely right, Kostas. This is the direction that my customers tell me that they want to go. As I said at the start, every customer I speak to is we need to automate everything. No one does anything manually, and that's great. So I turn it back to Brian.
Awesome. Thanks so much for this discussion so far. It's at this point in the show that we like to ask our guests to make some type of bold prediction on the future. Now, this can be related to the topic we've discussing, automation, or anything regarding IT. So, Konstantinos, can you share with us what you think is coming up on the horizon?
On this one, I will go with the flow. So, what I believe is that AIOps is something that will play its role moving forward when it comes to IT operation, automation, and basically the evolution of DevOps. Why I'm saying that? So as we move forward, applications and infrastructure are growing in complexity. So I feel that at some point, traditional DevOps or platform engineering practices are going to face some limitations. So this is where I believe that artificial intelligence and machine learning are here to enhance and automate IT operations.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining our podcast today. And thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of the NetScaler Podcast. You can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or the Citrix community website. You can also find us on YouTube if you'd like to watch the video version of this interview. And if you're already here, leave us a comment on what you thought. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.